Hey everyone, in today's video we're diving into 6 terrifying encounters that defy explanation. From creepy noises under houses to mysterious floating orbs, these stories will leave you spooked. Let's get into it, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling content. The first 2 years I went to college, I still lived with my parents, so I had to commute about an hour each way. I had a killer final at about 10 a.m. You know the final where you are going to need every second, and the instructor even warns everyone not to be late. For some dumb reason, I was running late. I figured I would be 20-30 minutes late, but I am a good test taker, so I might still be able to turn it around. Now my parents live in the foothills, and the college is in a large valley. When I hit the valley, I also hit a wall of fog so dense that I could barely see the road 10 feet in front of the car. If you have ever experienced tool fog, you will know what I am talking about. It is not unheard of in our area to get 30 to 40 car pileups as a result of this dense fog. I had to slow my pace to a crawl and peer and strain just to make out the yellow line, so I would not cross over and be on the wrong side of the road. My speed went from about 65 to about 20, and that was as fast as I could reasonably go. I was super stressed and mentally cursing myself for not considering the possibility that I might run into problems on the way to school and running through my mind different ways of begging my professor for extra time. I was so stressed that I took the wrong turn and found myself somewhat lost. I did not recognize the street I was on. It's an agriculture area, so there are not really any landmarks to speak of, just roads and fields of trees or crops. I was fairly confident I was going in the right direction at least, so I kept on, and after a bit of trial and error taking this road and that, I eventually found myself on a road I recognized the name of, and eventually found my way into town to my university. I was almost literally sweating bullets though. I did not wear a watch, but I knew from when I left and all the extra time I sucked up creeping through that fog that I was going to be at least an hour late. I figured the best course of action was to go to the class and throw myself at the mercies of the professor. At least the fog was a reasonable excuse. I got there, and there was no one there. I cursed and fumed, figuring that I had missed the final entirely. Then I checked the clock in the classroom. I was half an hour early. I have run this thing through my head hundreds of times. There is no rational explanation for how this could have happened. I accidentally time traveled. 96 had been a bad year. My first marriage ended, my father died, and my job had taken a turn for the worse. So after dealing with all that, when I finally had a few days with nothing to do, I gave myself a present. A Greek cruise. It was my 31st birthday, and I found myself in the middle of the night walking around the sleeping cruise ship. I found my way outside and was taking in the moon, the distant lights of unnamed islands and other cruise ships, and the cool breeze of the ocean. It was a nice moment, thinking about what I had been through and getting ready to start again in so many ways. Then I saw it. A light is on the horizon, seemingly following one of the other cruise ships. As I looked at it, trying to identify what it was, it moved across the ocean faster than any boat I'd ever seen. It went to the next cruise ship and hovered beside it for a few minutes. Then it started growing, and before I could realize that it was actually coming toward the ship I was on, it was already there. It matched my ship's speed and seemed to hover just a few feet away from the handrails and just a few feet above the ocean. We were going at a fairly fast clip, and I could feel the ship move up, now with the waves under my feet. Whatever it was, it looked like a fat pillar, a tower of some sort. A cylinder of maybe 10 feet in radius and taller than the ship, my guess, would be 50 feet tall. It had bright colored lights, almost like floodlights all around its top, middle, and bottom. The lights were so bright that they made it difficult to see the body of the thing, but I could almost guess circular openings or portholes in places. I realized that the thing didn't just pick any spot beside my ship to stop. It had stopped directly in front of me, the only person standing there. I didn't think this was a coincidence. Then, it started moving again. Very fast. Toward the next ship ahead of us. Only then did I remember that I had a camera hanging from my neck, but by the time I got it up to my eye, the object was far away, indistinguishable from any other of the lights on the ocean. I have no explanation at all for this. I am a skeptic, and I try to base my life on facts and logic. This event is the one thing in my life that I could never explain or understand. When I was in high school, I was in a band with two of my friends. We primarily played Christian music, so it was seen as acceptable by the higher-ups of the church for us to have access to the large, empty building at night to practice. We took full advantage of that and held practice in the church about once a week. Late one night during one of our practices, we decided to stop for a break because we'd been practicing for a while. We joked around a bit before reaching a point in our conversation where we all got quiet. As we were sitting there in silence, we started hearing a faint voice somewhere in the distance. Since we were supposed to be the only people in the church and the doors were locked, we were a little surprised. The church had a history of being broken into, so our minds immediately went in that direction. We decided to look around the church. This was a big church, to see if someone had come in. The church was dark and empty. We came back to the stage we were practicing on with a weird feeling. We sat quietly to see if we could hear the voice again. After about a minute, we began to hear it again. My friend then walked over and put his ear next to one of our speakers. Sure enough, there was a woman's voice coming through the speaker, saying things such as, "He will return to us." It reminded me of some freaky, dramatic lines you'd hear in a movie. That's when we started to flip out a bit. We unplugged all the microphones and amps from our system to see what would happen, but the woman's voice kept coming faintly through our speakers. We had set up our own system separately from the church's PA system, so every source of sound hooked up to our speakers was accounted for and had been turned off. We had already searched the church for the noise to make sure we weren't somehow picking up on someone talking or a tape playing, which was unlikely anyway. But as I mentioned, the church was completely empty and dead quiet. We decided to call it a night at that point. Even though I've gotten away from the whole Christianity thing, I can't help but get chills when I think about that night. We practiced in that church many times after that, but we never heard the voice again. I can't explain it. It was strange. I had a very strange experience on a camping trip in a national forest area in Colorado last summer. It wasn't an official campground, but there were about 6 groups of campers along the edge of the forest, all within about 1,000 feet of our site. The other campers all had guns with them, and they were shooting them all day long. We didn't bring guns. About 15 friends aged 18-25 were sitting around a campfire late at night, drinking heavily. Some of the group had done drugs. We started telling ghost stories. Kind of childish, but older kids say scarier shit. We were all scared shit around the campfire at 3 a.m. when we heard a pack of coyotes howling pretty far off in the distance. We didn't think anything of it because it happens pretty often in Colorado. They usually howl after they kill a rabbit or something. After about 10 minutes, we heard the coyotes again, but a little bit closer. This time, though, immediately after the coyotes started howling, we heard about a solid minute of rapid gunfire. We were freaking out a bit at that point because we thought the other people had killed the coyotes at 3 a.m. But then, after another 10 minutes or so, we heard the howling again, this time even closer than before. Then we heard several gunshots again. It seemed like the coyotes were moving between each of the campsites and massacring them, and they were slowly getting closer to ours. We couldn't see any of the other campsites since they were all in the forest. But after this happened a few more times, howling, then gunshots, we all decided to run and hide in the camper. In our drunken state, we left out all of our burgers, brats, s'mores, and beer. We all passed out pretty soon, and nobody heard anything. But the next morning, the entire campsite was trashed. All the food was gone, some of the chairs had been torn, and the trailer had a flat tire. The worst part is not knowing whether we were actually in danger, or if the whole thing was alcohol and drug-induced paranoia. A friend of mine was hearing weird noises underneath his house. He said he was also creeped the hell out by it and felt weird vibes from the house. They had just moved in. But I ignored that part like a skeptic boss. I was over one time during the day, which hampers the horror movie quality of the story, I guess, and he stopped me mid-sentence and alerted me to a tapping noise, then a slam. You can access underneath the house from outside, as there is a door underneath the back porch, so we go down to find it sitting wide open. There was no significant wind at all. We just stared at the door for a while. Nothing happened for a good 15 seconds until, to our complete and utter horror, we watched as the door swung closed and locked itself. The lock is a bolt that has to be pushed really firmly through a bracket on the door frame. He tells me it still happens all the time. It's still the craziest thing I've ever seen. I was 13 or so, with my dad camping by the Kern River. We had met this dude, Jeff, who we became fishing buddies with, and he ended up setting up camp with us at our site. Well, one night we're sitting around telling stories and my dad gets tired and goes to bed. So then it's just me and this dude talking, telling stories, etc. Everything is going fine when I look up to see a white, fuzzy ball about the size of a volleyball coming towards us. At first, your brain does the checklist. Animals, garbage blowing, balloons, etc. It didn't sink. "Jeff, what's that?" I asked. Jeff looked up at this thing, slowly coming towards us, clearly floating several inches off the ground. "I don't know." He trailed off. It came closer and closer to our fire. I remember it was moving the grass, but only the tops of the grass were pushed down as it came along its path. Our conversation, meanwhile, was stuck on repeat. "Jeff, what is that?" "I don't know." "Jeff, what is that thing?" "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." By now, it had come right up to our fire. It was solid, but the edges were diffuse, like fuzzed out. We were like 3 feet from it. It stopped before going right into the flames, went around to the opposite side we were sitting on, and then floated right on up a hill and disappeared over the top onto the road. At this point, we were both just sitting there, breathing heavily. After a few minutes, we got up to look for it and ran up to the road, but it was gone. My dad told me on the car ride home that if Jeff hadn't seen the same thing, he never would have believed me. I will never ever know what this thing was, and it bothers me to this day.